conferencing. There you are.
There I am.
I also changed your name like a professional would do because Rev here would be thinking your name's Tony. I've already started recording, by the way, Mike. I don't think we're going to brand this one as a Suede cast since we're not going to be talking Suede, by the way.
Yeah.
I'll just put this on next Tuesday on our off week. We're doing talk like, you know what we're talking about, Rev, and I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I assume you're talking about shoes.
No, we are mainly known for Savage Worlds.
Oh, okay.
Funny enough. And the new edition was Savage Worlds Adventure Edition, so it's known as Suede.
Oh, all right. What is Savage Worlds? Like, what does that run off of?
Savage Worlds runs off of Savage Worlds.
Fair enough.
It's a generic system.
Oh, okay.
They just shifted, but this was the edition beforehand, which is deluxe, which sadly they're not known for this anymore because of printing costs, but this is $10.
Oh, okay.
It has a bunch of settings. It's best known for Deadlands. It was born out of the original Deadlands system.
Oh, okay.
Technically, Deadlands, then they created a minis game called Rail Wars, and it was born out of Rail Wars, but that's a history lesson.
Yeah. All the Suede stuff and the game we play is Monster of the Week. So
hey, there's nothing against Savage Worlds. That's not a dig because we're also running Savage Worlds, and we're like playtesting official settings for people who we are friends with and stuff like that. So that works. That's the one that it's really known for. It uses a deck of playing cards for initiative and some other mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And you sometimes get bonuses, but how good you are and stuff is determined by the size of the dice.
Oh, okay.
So you start untrained, which is a D4 -2, and then it goes D4 up to D12. It started me down the path of narrative storytelling because it has this concept of wild cards where all the players and like all the big bad villains have different rules than everyone else in the game.
Mm.
So it has nice stuff like that.
Huh. Yeah, I'm trying to start learning Dungeon World. Which all the dice are slightly different based off of your damage, but I'm trying to find a good place that I can listen to it. And, you know, I found a couple of podcasts that do Dungeon World, but it's, you know, they're so focused on the story, which is great, but they're not teaching me the game. And that's what I want I want to be taught the game as I listen.
Funny segue into official stuff. Again, one of our regulars on here, Susan, who we talked about, the lawyer, her biggest compliment about Critshow was that you guys actually teach the game.
Yeah.
That was really one of my big goals because I was like, no, a lot of people are going to be familiar with this game because we weren't familiar with it. And I knew that we would have a couple of friends who didn't play any games at all who would feel compelled to listen. So it was kind of for them, like, all right, I want to make sure this makes sense and that it's just not arbitrary numbers and arbitrary dice.
I will say there's a couple episodes where we directly reference you because by about episode 3, we started using the luck system.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing. It's actually made the game way more playable, and it was already a really playable game. But that's like, well, I want the dice to decide, but it's not based on anything. Luck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to make a choice, you know, to abuse you guys. And I also don't want to just give you a freebie. So you know what? Let's see how lucky you are.
Yeah. I've actually felt we have a tendency to ramble and do tangents here. I warn you ahead of time.
No, that's fair.
But I actually feel from a mechanic standpoint, it's beautiful because it gives a more tangible price to spending luck. Because you have a couple playbooks, The Chosen in particular, which Mike is playing, where it's like, when you spend luck, something happens. But for most of them, it's kind of like hit points in D&D. There's no real difference till you hit 0.
Yeah.
But with that roll, you know when you're spending luck, you're reducing your luck bonus for luck rolls.
Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, kind of nebulous in the book where it's like, oh, yeah, as you spend luck, things are going to stop going your way. Yeah. And this just seemed like a natural mechanic to make it a reality.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of mechanics that actually convey the tone they're going for. And the luck mechanic kind of has that simplicity where it ebbs and flows so naturally with how the luck system already worked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With that, that'll probably stay in.
So that leads me to like 3 questions.
Yeah.
Figure this out.
We got a little, because I think the biggest one I want to bring up, and this is that half plug, because we're all in a little bit of business. As I was telling you before we started recording, we're doing a Monster of the Week actual play. And one of the things I love about you and a lot of people who came in with Adventure Zone and stuff is you guys are also what I tend to call a produced actual play.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we came in and we actually asked people how we wanted the release schedule, everybody started saying, well, about Critical Role and Matt Colville. And I think a lot of people don't realize that a live actual play and a produced actual play are just totally different beasts.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your take on like how would you explain the difference between a produced actual play and a live actual play?
So for me, audio was so important because when I was first, I hadn't listened to any podcasts maybe 2 years ago, and I kind of was on a long drive and someone had suggested one, and I started listening to it, and it actually reignited my love of gaming because I had gamed for years, but then I went to grad school and it kind of fell by the wayside, and just life. It was the Glass Cannon where they play Pathfinder, and they're a great show, and I started trying to listen to other shows, and I'm just such a audio-centered person that I would get 5-10 minutes into something, and if the audio wasn't clean, I couldn't listen because it was distracting. And so I spent a good amount of time. I was very fortunate. My old roommate in college is a sound designer for theaters, and he designed like the sound at the Shed Aquarium in Chicago, and he just does sound all over the place, Jeff O'Brien. And so he kind of gave me a online crash course in audio, in editing and setting up parameters and processing, and how to set up the microphones and kind of kill the space. And so for me, the big difference of course is making sure that everything is as clean as possible, making sure that people don't talk over each other, because we are fortunate enough to all be in the same room when we record. That may not always be the case as we kind of start to grow and do other shows and stuff, but right now we're all in the same spot. And so it was training everybody not to talk over each other, and not to scream into the mic or to try to whisper into the mic. And so it became teaching them just microphone etiquette, which I had from my day job. I'm a stage actor, and so I've done a bunch of radio plays. And so just knowing that as you get quieter, you got to get closer, and if you get louder, you got to get a little bit away. And it took quite a while to get that into them, but it got there. And so then I go over it and I process it to kill out as much of the background noise as I can. And I usually truncate it so I can take out just dead silence. And then I'll go in, and if it's a moment that I think is important, or if I think that it'd be really cool, I'll go and I'll find a sound effect, or I'll build one and I'll drop it in. I'm really using a lot of cues from radio plays. If I can add in a sound effect that'll help, obviously I'm doing all the voices myself, but if it's a moment that'll kind of help tell the story, I would ultimately like to get to a point where we always have something in the background. That's kind of a future goal, to get something like Sirenscape, but that there is that level of production, like a radio play behind it.
I will actually send you some links when we're done here.
Oh, great.
Because now, granted, some of it's not free. We dropped about $80 to get 10 royalty-free tracks, which, when you're talking about production, is kind of a drop in the hat. So I'll send you some links there. But I will admit, I am not nearly as good at audio work as you. I don't think our games are as clean as yours. I try. I'm just not as good at it. But I think when you said radio play, that's the nail on the head for me. Personally, it's kind of this experience, because we have a full soundtrack at all times is what we're shooting for, kind of to cover the horrible audio at times. Also, I had to buy somebody, he's probably below you on your screen, a new mic, because he sounded like garbage.
Yeah, so one of the comments on, was it the first episode, or was it
Swadecast episode 1?
Swadecast, yeah. I think the person said, and I quote, that Mike sounds like the audio equivalent of AIDS.
So, followed by, did you record on a potato?
So that was good. So if you listen to our stuff, get past episode 1, and then everything should be okay.
Episode 2, actually episode 3, because episode 1 and 2 are one session, so your audio was bad on those sessions.
Right, I forgot that
which we put a disclaimer in, because also I bought someone a new mic, and then it came recording day, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I haven't been to Target and picked it up yet. It's not working. Can I record on my phone?" Which is also why we're doing that. But definitely, I think, at least for me personally, the soundtrack, the adding sound effects, that level of immersion is huge. But also that cutting dead silence.
Yeah.
I think that leads into, this is one of those where I don't think a lot of people realize, because again, one of those when you go and feel out, they're like, "Oh yeah, try to keep your episodes less than 3 hours, I feel like Critical Role goes a little too long. And you look at stuff like the Adventure Zone and you and what we're going to be doing, it's like, no, it's like 45 minutes. It's an hour. Like, how much of gameplay do you think in a session translates to an episode?
I would say that when we record, I probably cut maybe a third of what we record. I would say we record for a little over an hour and we end up with like 45 minutes. And because for me, and again, this is directly from that playbook of the radio play, if it is not action, humor, or heart, it goes. No one wants to hear us sit around and, try to look up what that power does again, or to try to find some dice, or to get into a conversation that kind of goes off on a tangent. Now, if it's humorous, I'll totally keep it in there, but I don't want to get to a point of just going off on tangents that don't add to the moment, because we do such a variation of kind of tense, dramatic moments, and then all of a sudden it'll get real silly and ridiculous. And so I like to keep that flow, but I want to make sure that it's a good balance. Like for me, I want something that's like 60, 70% gameplay, 30, 40%, humor dicking around, as opposed to a lot of places, I think that balance is kind of switched.
Oh no, I fully agree. I'm actually a little tighter on the reins. Like I said, I don't think we're very good at teaching the game as you guys are, but you go out with that intent.
Right.
And I have enough wrangling my players to just have good mic etiquette, as you would say. So I'm also cutting overlapping audio and stuff. Yeah. So ours are probably 50%, but we also record an hour and a half.
Oh, okay.
And all of that. But yeah, I think a lot of, and this is kind of that back and forth of saying things we both know, but people listening don't, you don't realize how much is on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
When it comes to that. And how much of what's on the cutting room floor isn't, oh, it's gold, you're chopping off. No, it's dead silence.
Mm-hmm. Or it's like a rambling sentence that afterwards everyone went, what did you just say? And they're like, yeah, let me say that again.
Oh, no, I definitely. One of our, speaking of that, the ums and ahs and the, I've actually gotten to the point where I can spot ums and ahs in the WAV file.
Yep.
You can tell someone who does audio editing because it's like, well, you didn't even listen to it. I see an Yep. I don't need to listen to it.
Yeah, and once you get used to your players too, you can start to see their particular, I don't want to say vocal tics. That I have one person who always, every time if he hasn't talked in a couple minutes, he'll clear his throat, say and then talk. And so I can see it though, so I don't have to listen to it. I can just cut that out. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to get better about not going after every because it is so time consuming.
It is definitely time consuming.
So,
because I was actually about one of my questions, because I have a little list. We're kind of professional here. How much time in post would you say you typically go? Because I did some research. I couldn't tell if you were the editor for the main show. I know you edit for Hero Salad.
Yeah. Yeah, I do edit the main show as well. Gosh, I space it out. I used to try to do it all at one time, and that was making it really tiresome. And it's not nearly as long of a process now as it was when we started. Now we're doing Hero Salad, and we're doing what we call Coin, Monster of the Week. And then we're actually starting to record something else for the summer, and I'm able to edit those things now faster than I used to edit just Monster of the Week. But I would say I probably spend close to 50 minutes, 45 minutes per 10 minutes that you hear. I think it's probably like a 4-to-1 ratio, maybe 5-to-1.
Yeah. I've actually found one of those funny ones, especially if you're doing audio editing and stuff. iPad's your best friend. Touch screens are surprisingly everybody says, I could never edit on a touch. I got used to it because I actually use LumaFusion because I'm doing video and stuff. Mm-hmm. But the ability to drag and drop, and mainly to see WAV files and literally just drag and shrink rather than click in macros. But yeah, even then, I'd say that's easily a 5-to-1.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah, it's super hard for me for some reason. I don't know if it's because I learned on my desktop, but every now and then when we're traveling, I try to do it on my laptop, and it's just something about it. It just is so much harder for me.
Touchpads are tricky.
Yeah, and it may just because I'm looking, when I edit here, I'm editing between two screens, and so anywhere else I'm doing one screen, and that always makes it less concise.
workflow. We're getting into whole other tangents.
Yeah.
We came here for gaming, and you're talking
exactly.
about workflow and editing techniques. But that's one of those funny ones of stepping away from games for a second. One, you were actually on my short list. I was really happy to see that you were in the same Discord community as me of people I wanted to interview, because you're another person who actually went to school for acting and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So it comes from a really interesting place. So I know we can get into tangents of editing and all of that. But I think this is a question I wanted to ask you specifically, because we have some go-to questions of, has tabletop gaming and stuff helped or influenced your career in acting, at least in the art and the craft? Because I think a lot of people talk about how acting has influenced tabletop, but has tabletop influenced your craft when it comes to acting?
Yeah, I think that the biggest way that, playing games before I started acting, because I started with Earth Dawn. I played Earth Dawn in, I think, 10th grade, and I started doing stage stuff in like 11th grade, and I played throughout college as well, is that, you get on stage and there are, crazy moments, there are bigger than life circumstances, and they're definitely easier to grasp because of being able to get in the moment in a game where it's a fictional world. And I would say more so than acting, it's actually made me a better acting coach, because I can talk to somebody and say they're not hitting a moment. I'm like, okay, so can you do this as if you were, and give them a much bigger idea that connects into what I know they like. If like they're a big Harry Potter person, they've just had something has hit them and it's very pain. I'm like, okay, so this is, someone just said this to you and it's very hurtful. But I want you to add a layer behind it of like, imagine that you have just been hit by a curse, like that someone has just, with that word, she's shooting with her wand and that has just hit you. And to be able to add that kind of fantasy element into some people makes a world of difference, because it is all make believe anyway. And so to try to keep it in a realistic world, they're just, everybody's different. And so I've discovered more and more young performers who take to adding a layer of fantasy to whatever it is they're envisioning as they try to process a moment or a scene.
Yeah. Now it's one of those things, because I've done coaching and stuff for improv back when that was what I did. Because I actually acted for about 12 years as well before I went into film and everything. And I've always toyed with this idea of basically taking like an improv class and more or less finding the right system that's easy to learn. I'll just be like, we're playing a game today. Mm-hmm. Let's put your improv skills to work when you have to react to random numbers.
Yeah. Did you see the book that Evil Hat put out? The Improv for Gamers?
No, I haven't.
They just published it. I think maybe 2 months ago, but it is called Improv for Gamers.
Yeah.
Oh man, I dropped all my money on a Nintendo Switch. I gotta.
I've heard it's an awesome book. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
I actually have a copy on order, so I think it's supposed to be here at some point. But
with my in-person groups, I actually tend to use a lot of the tools I learned from improv classes and stuff, and more or less sometimes put my groups through. It's one of those where I let them know, like, hey, we're not gonna game today. Come over. We're gonna try some stuff for RP. And when I say RP, I actually mean I'm gonna teach you improv.
Yeah. Well, and two of my 3 players are. I was in an improv troupe with them when I was in undergrad. And then the third player just kind of throws himself in. He's very willing to try. So it's been very beneficial. He, none of them really freeze up in the moment.
Which one isn't the person with an improv background?
Jake, the Divine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I see it. It's hard to tell because you're so lucky with your group. Yeah. You guys are just such a great unit. And it doesn't surprise me at all when you're saying not only do they have an improv background, but some were from a troupe with you. Because that dynamic is really good.
Yeah, and I've known them all for so long too. Even Jake, who's the person I've known the shortest amount of time, I've known for 3 years now, and it all started with a game. So, did
any of that and that improv background go into when you figured out like what players you wanted to actually have an actual play podcast with?
Yeah, actually. So when we first started, it was going to be Jake running a game of Pathfinder with Tass and I. And he had come up with a story about we were going to play Vigilantes. And we recorded the first couple episodes of it, and it just wasn't firing right. And it wasn't as dynamic as I wanted it to be listening to it. And, there was a lot of mechanics too, of course. So then we were at C2E2 and TJ was rooming with us, and I had just gotten my copy of Monster of the Week, and we were reading through it and talking about it. And they kind of had the idea of, oh, what if we played this just for fun, and we played ourselves, and we kind of started talking around the room like, oh, I would be this, I would be this, I would be this. And so the next week I had just set up all the recording equipment after working with Jeff. And I was like, oh, I've got 4 spots. So I'm going to have TJ come over and let's play this just to test the audio. And we played for like 2 hours, and TJ left, and I turned to Tass and I went, that's the show. And he's like, yeah, it's that third person that we're missing. And it's specifically, it worked well with TJ because TJ adds a level of chaos. Yes. TJ is chaos. I never know what he's going to do. He doesn't know what he's going to do, just in life in general. And so in the podcast, when he's got these crazy science powers now, he's always pulling out something where, no matter what contingency I might try to think ahead for, he's going to do something where I just go, oh, yeah, all right.
Now, when you saw and you realized TJ was part of the show, was any of it also when you realized Monster of the Week is the system for an actual play?
Yes. And, that for me was the big thing. We kind of made the switch away from Jake running it, and I realized how much more I wanted it to be based on the story and less time looking up rules, talking about game mechanics. We still play Pathfinder, but it's, obviously it is, as they say, super crunchy, and it just wasn't as interesting for me to listen to even when editing it. And I thought, if I'm not jazzed about it, if I've made it and I'm not that excited to listen to it when I edit, how can I expect anyone else to be that excited about it? And so then listening to Monster of the Week when we had recorded it, it was like, oh yeah, this is something I could get into. And so I think that it can kind of cross that line of it's still a game, but it can be engaging for people who don't game.
Exactly. Actually just last week I did the announcement because our patrons and stuff knew this show was coming, but I did the official announcement. And the way I put it, because as I was telling you before we were recording, our channel's known for Savage Worlds, and it can make a good actual play. But as I put it, Powered by the Apocalypse systems just make for a better listening experience, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's just that because it's so narrative, and yes, there's dice, but it's always story and it's all based on the description. It almost forces people who aren't used to it to think in a radio play kind of way.
And it gets everybody much more involved in, because the way they describe how they're doing something might change the dice that they roll.
Right.
And so instead of just going, okay, I'm going to hit it 23. Okay, that hits. There is that element of handing the narrative back and forth of even, them attacking something.
Yeah. Personally, my background, I've played a lot of before. Well, I played some D&D and stuff back in the day, but before even Savage Worlds, I got very into Fate for similar reasons, and had this core group of Fate players who the game was all about the story. It was less about the mechanics because, it's not a very mechanics-heavy system. And most of them, actually I guess all of them, except for one, had like a theater background or something like that. And then we move into other systems like Dungeons and Dragons. So like, we're going to play Dragon Heist in a few weeks and check that out. And they're like, where are the storytelling elements to this game? And I'm like, we'll figure it out. It's okay. But usually it's players who are the opposite, who are like, I don't understand this story thing. I just want to run through a dungeon and stab things. And that's
right.
Like stereotypical old school gamer. And I feel like games in general are moving, like Powered by the Apocalypse, Fate. I think they're two great examples of how games are pushing story over mechanics anymore. So,
well, I think that especially with Monster of the Week, one of the things that I think speaks to how much fun that is as a game is that even for me, when it comes to like Earth Dawn or Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons, there's always that level of, oh man, what's the loot going to be?
Yeah.
And there's no loot in this game. You don't get anything. And so
I don't know. You added gear points, man.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Which I haven't stole from my game because they're 16, 17-year-olds, but I love.
Oh, yeah.
I have nunchucks. It's all I need. So
yes.
He's our chosen, who is his family owns the local movie theater, which it's Baytown, so it's the Begaplex.
Mm-hmm.
And he's I guess by the time people hear this, we'll have enough release. He's the Iron Serpent, and he's a huge Iron Fist fan, and he has enchanted nunchucks, and his skin turns to iron when he gets hit.
Do you guys have a divine?
No. Mike is thinking about shifting into it.
I will be fascinated to see, because I never imagined how drastically this would change the tone of my game. Mm-hmm. But having someone that can teleport, I can't imagine how much smaller our radius of influence would be, like where I would have them go, what I would have them do if they didn't have that. Oh yeah, we can go there once and then teleport back. It has changed the world. It definitely made it more complicated, but it makes it easier in some levels too. So I'm interested to see what it's like for you guys without that.
Supernatural angel wings.
I think it's really fun how, especially Monster of the Week, and to a less, some of the other Powered by the Apocalypse games. Like I play a Masks game too. I don't know if you've seen Masks before.
Yeah.
But the different playbooks can really, really influence the style of game you're running. Mm-hmm. So I like how much that kind of stuff dictates kind of what the GM has to do, because like you said, well, now they can teleport, so my world just got a lot smaller.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? And I like that the characters influence the game so much, I guess, and have such a kind of a control over the mechanics.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, let go a little bit as a game master, because...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that does bring into it. I didn't even write this question down, though I planned to and forgot. But how much prep would you say you tend to do before, and especially for something like Monster of the Week?
Yeah. It was hard. It would be hard to put a time on it. But when I first started our first adventure, I prepped. I obviously prepped the characters that they ran into. I prepped the monsters. I prepped a timeline. I made the map. I kind of had everything down. And just from that first adventure, I started realizing that there's no way to prep, because I don't know where they're going to go, what they're going to do. And so now I will have a sketch of the map. I will have, the monsters, of course, and I'll have a loose timeline. But the further we go, I think the less my prep becomes, because it sometimes becomes unnecessary work. I'll use Ori as an example. Ori is an NPC that they meet in the second adventure when they go to Hawaii, and he ends up becoming an ally to them. And when I wrote Ori, he was the villain. Like, he was not the monster they were going to fight, but he was definitely the person in control of that area. And just their interactions with him, the way they talked with him, the way they treated him, as we went, I went, this isn't who Ori is. And so, that character got rewritten in my head as we played through that story to become who he is now. And so, sometimes it's just, I'm like, oh yeah, he's going to be this and he's going to do this. And then the world's like, nope, he doesn't fit that. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I really stand by Stephen King's mentality of characters, that you create characters and then they tell you what they're going to do. If you try to force a character to do something that they're not built for, it's going to be awful. So
the audience can feel it.
Yeah.
Which is another one of my questions, because I got to ask this, because there actually have been a lot of really great ones. I love Ori, but what's been your favorite NPC in the campaign to play as?
I didn't play it as him much. My favorite moments were in the Plague Doctor. I love the Plague Doctor story. I love just the whole mystery behind who is this and what do they want. And I get at least 1 or 2 messages a week from people when they get to essentially what is kind of the end of the Plague Doctor story, where I end the episode. I don't want to spoil it, but
I was going to say,
when I end it with a sound effect, and I will get messages from people going, "What the hell is wrong with you? I was driving my car." Or,
I think that was the first sound effect you used in this.
It may have been. I had so much fun building that. I got a message just the other day from a guy, actually the guy who runs the Monster of the Week Discord, and he was like, "Well, that was the last thing I heard, and now I have an 8-hour workday ahead of me. So screw you, because now I have to wait 8 hours to find out what happens." But Damien is also a lot of fun to play.
Damien's a fun character. Weirdly, I think for voices, Baba Yaga might be my favorite.
Yeah,
but I have a thing for like the creepy, drawn out voices.
Yeah, It's so great too because Jake sits across from me at the table. And some of these voices, when I'm doing them, he'll just be sitting there watching me and moving his mouth, like trying to figure out how I'm doing it. He'll just be like,
Yeah, well, because there's a lot of physicality to voices.
Yeah.
A lot of people
yeah.
get too, unless you voice act and you do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, unless you've ever really watched some of those behind the scenes stuff of, Disney movies, you don't realize how much physicality goes into creating those different voices.
Which I guess a tip for GMs, if you feel like you can't get an NPC down unless you do something that makes you look a fool, feel free to do it. You're the GM.
Absolutely.
Mike, do you have any questions? Because I mean, I know you're co-host, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
For the interview.
Well, let's see. The other question, we kind of talked about why you chose Monster of the Week for the actual play, but I was curious if you have any other. I mean, you mentioned Pathfinder and Earth Dawn as well. Are they like your go-to games outside of Monster of the Week, or?
Yeah, Earth Dawn is what I learned on, and Earth Dawn is actually what Jake and TJ and Tass actually all learned on too. It was years ago, but they learned it from me playing it with them. We're doing so much stuff now that we play Pathfinder. It used to be once a week. It's a little less frequent just because of people's schedules. We have some other people that are not involved with this that play that game, and TJ doesn't play Pathfinder. But really, video games is what, if we have a moment to do something else, we try to play video games. We are playing right now 3 different Powered by the Apocalypse games as we record, so there's not really a time for a fourth game.
Yeah, that's true. There is a third, because I always think of Hero Salad in this one.
Yeah. The third one is it'll be kind of our intermission from Monster of the Week, so that I can have a little bit of time to prep season 2. We don't want to stop putting anything out, so we've got a kind of 8 or 9 week thing that we're going to put kind of as our summer fare.
Yeah, because you guys are doing a long season.
We are.
I'm on the last episode, or the most current episode right now. I will say, I found you guys like 3 weeks ago. I've just been thinking that hard. Because I have a pug, so when I'm walking the dog, I'm listening.
Yeah.
Which I did stop in my tracks at the end of the Plague Doctor episode. And that was one I know Mike hasn't listened to. He hasn't gotten that far into, but I was like, I don't want it. It's rare where there's a podcast that I feel like there's spoilers, but that's
yeah. I was very fortunate too. Our first sponsor that we got, and he still works with us now, is a cosplay photographer, and he has made. I can actually send you some of them, but he does shoots with us as the characters, and so we got some amazing photo shoots that we did with the Plague Doctor. Where he used some smoke effects to make it look like they play themselves, and I always play as the villain. And so I made the Plague Doctor, I've made the Soul Bat, and I made Damien.
Nice.
And so it's awesome. Really fun to do with him.
Yeah, you guys are doing stuff well above. I even saw your guys' Patreon. I'm like, we need to step up our Patreon game. I've just been doing, I know you guys, one of the things I found really cool, at least in the early episodes, when you're like, well, if we have an episode done, we're just putting it up. We're not making it wait. Where I literally just go, I'm putting it up on Patreon because that's all I got.
I am, if you can't tell from this conversation already, I am a researcher. I work in the arts, and so I know what it's like to try to raise money, and when you're trying to get people to donate. So I spent a lot of time going through Patreon and seeing what people were offering at what tiers, and trying to come up with something that we could reasonably do that felt like it would be some kind of a worth the cost to people.
An actual reward.
I've looked at it, and I'm not going to lie. I don't want to say like rip off. We're not doing Hero Salad, but I'm going to use that as a strong model, because that is one of the best models I've seen for like how to do a Patreon for a podcast and for an actual play. It's really well put together.
Thank you.
Which goes into, I'll save that one for last. This was going to be my last question, but for people, because especially with the popularity of Critical Role and now the boom that was Matt Colville's Kickstarter and everything, you see more people trying to go out with actual plays and that kind of stuff. Is there any advice before you really got into it you wish you had before you started a podcast, and probably more specifically an actual play podcast, because it is its own kind of field?
I'm trying to think of something I wish I had known. I think what I wish I had known was that equipment, if you are in the same space, is less important than processing. You know, we spent some time and saved some money up a couple months ago and got much nicer mics, and we tried to record with them, and it was awful because it was just they were such nice mics. They were picking up everything, but because we were in the same room, no matter how much we dampened everything, you were still getting a bunch of bad bleed and echo. So the thing that might surprise you is that we record our show with $9 microphones. We got them a pack of 3 on Amazon for, I think it was $20 some, and then I bought.
Are they lobs?
No, they are just standard.
Oh, nice! Usually that cheap, I think, of a lav.
Yeah, they're just standard, you know, on a podium microphone, and it was learning how to process them that made all the difference. And so that you don't have to get the most expensive equipment if you spend a little bit of time learning how to process the equipment you have.
Oh, definitely. I had, it's fine, one of those. I'm not sure how much work I'm putting into our first season because halfway through the season, I had a really nice mic too, and the cable crapped out. And all of that kind of fun stuff. And I found the Blue Ice, which is the like snowball one. It's kind of been perfect for this because it turns out it's listed as a cardioid mic, like just about all of them, but it's basically a half circle.
Yeah.
So it's really good for group play and in-person games because I can be like over here and the audio quality doesn't really shift any.
Yeah.
So you can kind of have one mic setup for all your players and the distance is about 1.5 feet.
Okay.
Which is a nice range.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the big thing with these microphones is that you do have to be diligent about staying right on it because as soon as you go anywhere else, it's gone. But it's what stops a lot of the bleed from, you know, the rest of the world in this office.
Yeah. Well, to give you an like, obviously, I haven't run it through post or anything yet. I have my heater running. I have a dog in the crate right in the other room. These have been, it's like $40. These are really great setup for people looking to do that. So I guess the other big question, this was the one I was going to ask before we got into, podcasts and stuff. But when it comes to running Monster of the Week, what is something you wish you knew or advice you wish you had for running Monster of the Week that you kind of have now that you wish you had when you started?
You know, the book says it so well about being a fan of the players that I can't think now that there was ever a time where someone would be like, hey, this is what I want to try. And I would go, no, that doesn't really make sense. I think that if they can justify it, you know, you try it. But something I wish I had known about the game, it might be that, and I don't think this would have changed how we play it because I made a workaround for it. But, you know, it seems to me if you were just to play a Monster of the Week game, that the hunters are fairly disposable with their hit points and the creatures, that there's a good chance any session you're going to have somebody die. And so there's not a lot of healing mechanics in the game. You know, 1 or 2 people have a heal move and the ramifications of a fail on it are pretty bad. And so all the downtime of, okay, yeah, you can rest and you can heal, but it's going to take, you know, X amount of time. And I didn't want to have that 5 or 6 days passing between every episode. And so then I, you know, made the werewolf serum. So that's really the only thing is I wish that I had known how tricky it would actually be to keep people from dying just on accident.
Yeah, because it does stack up. I mean, there is first aid.
Yeah.
That like 1 hit point. But by the book, even the magic healings, basically once you've tried it once, you're done because it's not really a game of retrying rolls. A roll encompasses so much. Yeah. That's been my problem of, I don't know if you saw in the community, I had to go in because he went chosen and then he took a monstrous ability that lets him negate 1 damage and it's not technically armor. So does it stack? And when it's the equivalent of 3 armor, anything that hurts you kills everyone else.
Yeah. Well, and we had that same issue with Jake. He took, I can't remember what he took, but he may have taken the Chosen's thing as the divine. And so he had his armor, and then he also took whatever it is, hard to kill or invulnerable. I can't remember what it's called. Immortal. Yeah. And he was like, well, I'm just going to ditch my armor. And so then that actually became a plot point for a later story that his god was like, hey, why are you ditching my armor? You know, this isn't what, you're not representing me. You've got to, you know, be out there showing the world that we exist. And so finding kind of story-based ways to make it so that suddenly he isn't a person who can absorb 4 damage, and any creature that could damage him is going to outright kill the other 2.
Yeah.
Is always a nice bonus.
Yeah, no, I just had the talk of, hey, I asked some people, we need to rework this.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I'm not afraid of character death, but I don't. Yeah. It's tricky with our first season because of them playing themselves. You know, we make that joke early on, like, okay, what happens if someone dies? Well, see you later. We got to find a new third.
Yeah, I definitely think that's like the one big pothole of the playing yourself. But I love that gimmick. I love that feel. Plus, weirdly enough, Monster of the Week is one of the easiest games I've ever seen to bring characters back. At least.
Yeah. And the ramifications of that are so interesting that's what subsided my fear. Because when we first started, I was like, I don't know if we can play this game. I don't want to play something where it feels like the characters are safe, like that there's no chance of them dying. But there are so many negative side effects to bringing somebody back that I was like, okay, this can still be workable and interesting then, you know, to point at like Supernatural. You know, none of the characters themselves die. I'm sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around, but you had asked earlier, like, what's something that I wish I had known that I know now? If you're playing in a game where you don't necessarily want the players to die often, but you have to figure out how to still hurt them or get them engaged in the story, if you can make characters around them, if you can make NPCs that they really care about and threaten the hell out of those characters and make them die, or at least let it be a possibility, that I think can affect the characters and the listeners just as much as the player dying. It's the thing with Spider-Man. You know, I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm going to hurt everyone around you that you care about. And so then that becomes not more work, but that becomes on me to make sure that the NPCs are engaging in a way that the audience and the players really care about them and are afraid that something bad could happen to them.
But without spoilers, that does make me have to ask, though, was them finding jingles just you twisting the knife?
It was.
Because it felt like a knife twist. Though.
Well, and part of it was because, you know, they were aware of that danger.
Yeah.
And they went halfway through the process and they just went, oh, well, and moved on. And I thought, well, there has to be heavy ramification for this because this is an imminent threat and you just decided not to deal with it because you got distracted.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it definitely was just kind of a twist.
Now, have you thought of taking any of the Monster of the Week and in turn kind of the Power of the Apocalypse mechanics and shifting it to your other games? I know you don't have time for it, but like for
you know, when I run Pathfinder, I'm running my people through Giant Slayer because I love the story. It's such a dynamic story and it traverses so many places. But then we start to play it and the rules get so much and we're trying to look stuff up and they're like, well, let's just not look it up. But it's like, well, if we're not taking the time to do all the rules, why are we playing this system still? Right. Can't we like port something else in? And so I have thought if I could learn Dungeon World or something like that, that I might just transfer that story over so they still get the experience of the story, but we're not dealing with all the things that are starting to bog us down when we play.
Yeah, one of the pet projects I'm currently working on is literally taking the things like the investigate a mystery mechanic and saying, how can I fit it in Savage Worlds? Because that's what we're known for. Because it's just, I like it so much better than the roll, oh, you got answers. It's roll, now you get so many questions.
Yeah.
Which causes more critical thinking, which I think is a more interesting route.
I actually, I guess the first game I ever GM'd was Pathfinder. I created this whole world, it was like a completely original campaign, real excited about it, brought in like 10 people to like kind of work as like a rotating cast. It was kind of like a West Marches style type thing. And the mechanics were just a lot, especially for a lot of people who were new players. So that game ended up going on hiatus and I brought it back like 2 years later in Savage Worlds. I just moved everything over. I'm like, we can translate this all to this other system that's a lot easier, and it worked great. So, I mean, I think it's just a matter of figuring out what you need and what you don't, and what system works well for what kind of game you want to play.
You know, that actually reminds me, you asked me that question, like, oh, what do I wish I knew? And at the time I was like, I don't know. But as we talk, I'm starting to remember a couple things. You know, I think one of the most important things about Monster of the Week 2, that it might be easy to forget if you're running the game, but the moves work, period. And so if someone, you know, the example that I'll use is in one of our kind of side games, they had just arrived to a new location and someone rolled their power And the thing was, one of their options was, where is the next major event going to occur? And we had the thought of like, well, there's no way for you to know that. You don't know the city. You can't know. And it was like, well, no. The moves work. So it becomes about you as the GM finding a dynamic way to, so what they ended up doing was that, they walk across and they see something glint on the ground. They pick it up and it's an arcade token. And then they hear an explosion. And so they know, if they're paying attention, they're getting their answer. You got to find ways to kind of dash it in, because that's, I think, the number one rule of Powered by the Apocalypse games is that the moves work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've personally kind of found that freeing when it comes to the prep I do, because I just look at those questions and I'm like, if I have an idea, here's my list of questions I need answers for.
Yeah.
As long as I have an answer for each of the questions, I'm good.
Yeah.
I think that's basically anything. Do you have anything else to ask, Mike?
I mean, you kind of mentioned it already, but if you have anything else exciting on the horizon coming out or anything new you want to talk about, if you don't, that's fine too.
Yeah, we're getting towards the end of our first season. My kind of mental image is that it'll wrap up in May, and then we're going to have kind of a little surprise game that we'll take our normal space for probably 8 or 9 weeks while we prep the second season. And we've got the Monster of the Week. We've got our Worlds in Peril game, which is our Patreon. We just hit the next tier actually 2 nights ago. So we're now putting that out 4 times a month. And then we're also doing Investigate the History, which is kind of our Monster of the Week lore. Myself and my friend who is a dramaturg, she listens to the episodes and she comes up with a bunch of history or questions about what it is we've done with the story. In the first story arc, she talks about the Curse of Macbeth, and she talks about the Halifax Theatre, because it was a theater in London that burned down. And she just kind of goes into all of the mythology and the history of stuff, and then asks me, why I made changes or what changes I made, or asks questions as someone who doesn't play any type of games.
Right.
And so, our Patreon is there. We're putting out a lot of content.
Cool.
So if you like what you hear, you're always free to join us there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And invest in the time to listen to Critshow, because it's been a blast, man. Like I said, I ended up binging 40 plus episodes.
Good.
There's definitely enough to keep people listening.
Yeah, good.
Find you. But I think with that, I'll be chopping this together. I'll do an outro later.
Okay.
So, where you don't have to hear me plug the channel and all that stuff.